Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman. I am thrilled to have you joining us today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. Before we get into the show, I just want to say Happy Veterans Day to everybody, to all of our veterans, and thank you so much for your service. It is very appreciated. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness. And we're going to look at different life cycles. We're going to explore them financially and emotionally because financial decisions and generally all decisions are not made based on logic or financial evaluation, but much more on the emotions associated with your finances. And that's so important to be emotionally healthy to make financial decisions. And although we might be somewhat general, we'd love to hear from you. So please let's make it more relevant. You can reach out to me on my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post your comments or questions on Facebook, YouTube, or any of the other platforms you might be listening to us on. And as I always say, going through a divorce can be a very big challenge. It can be possibly the largest challenge you ever face, but at the same time, it might be the largest opportunity that's ever given to you as well, all at the same time. And yes, you did hear that correctly. It can be a huge opportunity. The first blog I ever wrote that got picked up, I called Divorce is Awesome, right? And everyone was kind of horrified by the title. But basically, I was saying I felt my life had died this excruciating death until I realized there really was a huge opportunity in this to be able to reconnect with myself, with others, and in so many ways that I had lost along the way. My guest today is Justin Milrad, who I am excited to have. He's the author of the book You 2.0, just the concept I love, let alone the content, which we will get into. I like also that he is a dad, a coach, I'm leaving some out, but a strategist, a guy who gets things done. And one of the things I like so much is that Justin went through a challenging life cycle, and his response was taking these lessons, sharing them with other people, hence the book You 2.0, which I just think is a very commendable way to live your life. So Justin, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Thank you.
It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. And I also want to acknowledge Veterans Day and for all those people who serve to protect our great country.
It's a big sacrifice, and we do appreciate it for sure. You know, one of the things I always ask people is just to share a little about their background, but you have a story, and I think what you went through can really resonate with people very strongly. So I'm going to ask if you can share some of your story just to give people an understanding, kind of the passion, why you did what you did. And when I say it was challenging, that I'm not just saying that, it really was a challenging experience, if you don't mind sharing some of that.
Absolutely. So my ex-wife and I, we were married for 15 plus years, and we had the marriage that everyone wanted. We had fun, we went on trips together, we were the life of the party, and things were great until they weren't. I think one of the mistakes we made was that we owned a business together. We started it, we grew it. It became our life, it became our identity. While at the same time, we had 3 kids growing up in a household during COVID. And we kind of lost our way. And I want to honor my ex because we had many good years. And, it was good until it wasn't.
Right.
Then when it came time to divorce, I filed for divorce. I had my reasons, and we both agreed for it to be amicable. We both hired high power, well-respected, attorneys, and very quickly turned from an amicable divorce to war. Fast forward, it was a 3+ year divorce with an 8-day jury trial, and we spent 7+ figures on a divorce. And in hindsight, we made every mistake possible. I'm happy to say that my ex and I are really close these days as far as co-parenting. We're doing really well. Our kids are doing well, but we wasted so much time, money, energy, emotional capital, and made every mistake possible. Never in a million years did I think I'd be divorced, let alone be a divorce coach. But what I don't want to happen to other people is to go through what we went through, where we were, fighting over stupid things. There was ego. For every punch they gave, we gave one back, and it just went on and on and on and on. At the end of the day, working with a divorce coach kind of changed my entire philosophy, where there was radical acceptance and surrender. And when I finally made that decision, I changed my attitude from being a victim to being someone who can thrive through divorce. And Hirsch, to kind of go back to, I love divorce. I don't love divorce in the sense that the concept of divorce, but I can say I'm much happier now. And while I don't want to romanticize it in any way, shape, or form, I was given an opportunity to reevaluate my life and get off the hamster wheel, take a look at what was working and what wasn't, and recalibrate it. And I'm so much happier now.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because we're certainly not advocating that everybody gets divorced yet. But should it be that somebody needs that, there is an opportunity in it. Obviously, if you're in a coupleship, that's wonderful. And that is an opportunity to take advantage of and be able to grow together. So yeah, we're certainly not advocating everyone should get divorced, but sometimes, unfortunately, life takes you in that direction. And that's where we're talking about it should be able to be an opportunity. So I appreciate that you brought that up. And I just want to reiterate two quick things. One is that you said you had a jury trial, which is also, firstly, very few. They estimate about 3% go to trial, so very few to begin with. And it's even then extremely rare to even have a jury trial. So it does talk to the magnitude of what was going on. 7-figure obviously being $1 million plus. I just want to point out, from going from that again to being able to be friends, co-parent, and where you are today, that takes a lot. Most people would hold on to a resentment like that. I think that kind of brings me to my next question, really, is was there kind of that aha moment, that eureka, I'm on my journey and now I'm realizing that you could shift from that breakdown to breakthrough, going from surviving to thriving? What changed? Give us a little bit on that, if you would.
So hiring a divorce coach was probably the best decision I made. I just wish I knew about it, at the beginning of the process. It was 3 months before we were going to trial. There was nothing I could do, but it really changed my attitude. Number one, radical acceptance that this is a situation I'm in. Tomorrow's a mystery. Yesterday is history, and all I have is the now, and I can make the most out of it. And just kind of surrendering and saying, this is just where I am, and I have to make the best out of it. And I noticed with people, in the divorce community, I noticed a good amount of people were stuck 5+ years out. And that's because they didn't do the work. And when my coach said to me, I have to stop viewing divorce as something that happened to me and start seeing it as something that happened for me, that I could make some changes. And it's really just the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another chapter. So I was able to build a foundation of things that were really important to me in my life and to explore them, which I did. And I'd say in all aspects of my life, with the exception of financial, because it takes a lot of time to rebuild. I am happier in all dimensions.
So, and I just want to kind of reiterate, it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole, to spiral, to get swept up in negative emotions, and kind of like I think you were alluding to there, sometimes hold on to those negative emotions, right? For a long time. I've worked with people, you would think that they're in the middle of their divorce, and as you said, it's 5 or 6 years later, and they're still holding on to it in that way. It's not easy to turn the tide and give yourself over to others and help others. So I agree with you. I think it'll be a theme through this. There are so many resources for people going through a divorce today that weren't there 5 and 10 years ago. And being able to find the right professional, a divorce coach, is a wonderful resource to help bring the divorce into perspective, to help see what is happening in a way that sometimes you can't, because you're just too close. You're just too emotionally engaged in it. Be able to kind of step back, take that deep breath, and say, what's really happening here, and what direction can this go, or should this go, versus reacting. And I think those are big pieces as well. And that's a lot of upgrading in your thought process. A lot of, as you put your book, You 2.0 is obviously alluding to being an upgraded you, kind of looking at yourself in a new version. And in your book, you describe the idea of upgrading in your life like a software, an update of You 2.0. What are the biggest mindset shifts that people need to make to step into that next version of themselves?
That's a great question. I'd say the first one is that we are kind of programmed that if you're going through divorce, that the first phone call is to an attorney. And that may be the case, but I'd say, there are a lot of other really helpful professionals that can help you through the process and building your team. So when you think of a software upgrade, typically what happens in an upgrade, well, there are bug fixes, there are new updates, there are new things that can be added to make, your software or your app or whatever more valuable to you so that you can be more productive. Well, the industry has changed a lot. So, there are coaches, there are CDFAs, there are, CFAs, there are financial professionals, emotional professionals, therapists, all these sorts of things. And I think it's really important. And that's a mindset shift that maybe your first call should be to one of these people, and then they help you kind of navigate and figure out how to use, your attorney for their highest and best use. And I think something that's really important is there's a time period for a divorce. It's an operational process where there's a start and there's an ending. And then you get the stamp and you have a divorce decree. And what happens often at that point is that's really when the hard work starts. People are panicking. Oh, what do I do? How do I co-parent? I haven't done this. I haven't done that. Am I financially, okay? So I like to think of it, the upgrade is kind of like a loss to a laboratory. And what does a laboratory mean? It's the opportunity to redesign your life, but that also means going deep, identifying what are your values, and then, we talk about the financial piece, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but it's really important. The statistics say that women are 41% worse off financially after a divorce, and men are 23% more, worse off. So it's really important, the financial piece, to understand what is your budget going to look like? Is your lifestyle going to change? How are you going to pay for things? How are you going to divide things? Because with the more planning that you have and the more transparency, the better negotiation you can make in terms of dividing assets. And then you don't think or forget about the things that are really important, like first car, driving lessons, internship, even college in some scenarios. And I feel like the financial piece is the piece that's often overlooked because people just want to get it done. So instead of just getting through it, grow through it. And, I'm going to make a huge generalization here, but I think it's particularly true. Women typically outsource the financial component to the men. So there's a lot of learning that has to go on. And I think that the women often take on more of the parental responsibilities than the men. So we have to learn to do things that we might not be comfortable with, or we may not necessarily understand. And, my vision always is to get through the divorce as amicably as possible. But you need a strong co-parenting relationship, because it's not divorce that destroys kids. It's how parents handle divorce that destroys kids. So, as long as you continually learn, you continually grow, and you use your team for their highest and best use, you can move through divorce quickly, efficiently, productively, but most importantly, in a position where you're financially aware, hopefully secure, and you have a foundation for a very strong co-parenting relationship.
And I got to comment on so much. Firstly, the quote that you said, it's from your book. It's from chapter 12. And I'm going to read it because I actually wanted to come back to that later. Divorce itself doesn't damage children. How parents choose to handle it does. Choose actions that heal, not harm. Very powerful. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. But you're right. Having goals and aspirations, having an understanding of what your life's going to look like is so important. And, you're going through a divorce. You need to, in some ways, envision what your life's going to look like. I always take an approach when we create a strategy to base it off of your priorities and your values, because especially if you're a two-income family, you got less income, and the chances are either way you're going to have less income because there might be support being paid that you might be paying. But if you really identify what brings you joy, what is your value, what are your priorities, you really can live off less. And so that's one idea. I think of a few things. I had somebody, this is going back 5 or 6 years already, used to say that divorce is a human process with a legal document at the end, right? And what do we do first? As you said, in general, we call an attorney, but that's not necessarily the process that we're going through all the way through. So understanding how do we take care of ourselves? Who are the right people? I always tell my clients, you need 2 teams. You need a professional team, and that's usually beyond an attorney. It could be a therapist, it could be a coach, it could be a CDFA, it could be whatever is needed. That's one team. The other team is your emotional team. And it's not just anyone who's been through a divorce who might have a sympathetic ear, because you don't want people who are going to be unobjective and just yes, yes, yes. And you don't want people who are still bitter about their divorce. You want people that you really can rely on to give you good advice in those ways. So I'm a big proponent of those kind of 2 teams, that approach. I would also tend to say, especially like co-parenting, you can't sign a document and say, okay, let's figure out how to co-parent, because it could take you 6 months to figure that out. Some of these things you may need to think and discuss prior to the divorce being finalized, because often people split homes. How do we kind of have a similar feeling from a co-parental perspective in those homes? This is what I mean by being able to envision somewhat, what are we looking for? What are we doing? It also, I think, even if you're taking small pieces in the beginning to work with that spouse, it's helping train you in how to do things amicably. Also, the focus is not on you and me, but now it's on the kids, which you would hope, and I think most parents for them really are wanting the best for their kids. So understanding, being able to take it out of you and me and our maybe conflict that might be going on, or our divorce and process, how do we focus on others, and how do we start to work together, become, I think, very, very important pieces of this process.
No doubt.
So, I think this is probably a good time to take a break, because there are so many things we could go into, and we obviously have to take the break, pay the bills, and we can come back, do a quick recap. But before we go, can you share, how can people get in touch with you, whether it's to go look at your book, whether it's to see your website? What's a good way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.reclaimandreboot.me. You could always set up a free 30-minute consultation. My email is justin@reclaimandreboot.me. My book is available on Amazon.com. It's You 2.0, Divorce: A Better Way Forward. And then there's also a workbook, so you can do those deep introspective exercises to really dig deeper.
I encourage people to look at that. It's one thing to read and get a concept. It's another thing to really put it in my perspective, my life, and be able to move forward. It's not easy doing the work. I promise you it's worth it. So we'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This is the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman. Today we have Justin Milrad, the author of You 2.0, and we've been talking about a lot of different things people should be considering. I'm going to do a real quick recap as much as I can remember. But Justin, you shared some of your story and obviously the depth of kind of the conflict of a divorce, being able to turn that around, not just for you and your mindset, but the relationship co-parenting you have with your ex-spouse, which is always an amazing thing and a beautiful thing, especially for your children. I tell my clients so often to be able to role model for your kids going through adversity. This is the time to do it, and being able to show them how you really can go through life in a very positive and a good way. You spoke a little bit about that kind of shifting from breakdown to breakthrough, or as a lot of people say, surviving to thriving. We spoke about your book, comparing it, I guess, to that software update, which is such an important thing, to be able to look at your life, be able to say, how can I upgrade what I'm doing? We spoke a little bit about, I guess, creating structure with professionals. We didn't use those words, but being able to incorporate your teams, that the professional team that can walk you through the appropriate pieces. And again, I think it's very important to use the right professional for the right piece of your divorce. You have a cheaper bill at the end usually because, hey, I'm a finance guy, not somebody who's going to be your emotional or your emotional coach. I'm not your legal expert. Don't use me for things you're not getting your bang for your buck. But at the same time, the emotional side of what could be a great team to help you get through this, and being selective, obviously, on both teams as well. We did speak a little bit about this being a human process, being able to go through this, being able to identify beyond the divorce, which is so important as well, because that's the life you're going to be living. I say to a lot of my clients, this is not the last chapter in this part of your life. In many ways, it's the first chapter in the rest of your life. How you go through it really does determine a lot of the things that will come beyond your divorce as well. Anything else? Anything I missed, or something you want to reiterate that might be important that we can touch on?
I think it's really, really solid list. I think it's really important to realize that going through divorce, you make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. So when you're in crisis mode, everything feels urgent. On the financial side, I think people give up a lot of things, in the negotiation that in hindsight they regret, because they just want to get it done. And I think,
sorry, go ahead, finish.
I said, I don't want to minimize the importance of the financial component. The law states a certain division, it's either 50-50 or equitable division. And it's very easy to give away stuff. But you also have to plan for the future. And I think it's really important to, and this is just my philosophy, it's not everyone's philosophy, is to try and create some sort of consistency among the homes so that the kids, may live in a similar type of home. They have similar opportunities. You don't want mom in a 10,000 square foot home with pool and tennis courts and dad in a 2-bedroom apartment, because then they're not, the kids aren't going to want to go hang out with dad. And I think it's really important, as long as it's, the mom and dad are healthy and there's no serious, substance abuse or mental health issues. It's important for kids to have, both parents.
Right.
So, making these permanent decisions on temporary emotions is really, key.
And consistency is the very key piece. That's, kids need that structure. They need that consistency. The other piece that I think what you just said is so important, and it's something I like to do with my clients, is once we've identified those values and priorities, we know that everything else, so to speak, is cannon fodder. That's part of your strategy. It's not just what would I like to keep, but the other pieces, how do I use those to get more of what I'd like to keep? So again, being able to give things away is important, but not to regret that later, I think. And talking about regrets, what do you think is one of the biggest, or maybe the biggest mistake you see people make when they're in survival mode right after the divorce, or as they go through that divorce, both financially or emotionally?
I think being stuck as the victim or being stuck in their divorce story, I think if you ask people, 3-5 years out, what are some of the regrets? It's not that I could have saved the marriage, because typically you're getting divorced for a reason, but it's that I didn't really take the time to understand and do the work and, become the best version of me, and to be, a role model to my kids.
Right.
I think that's big. I think isolation is also big. For a lot of people, it was, even for myself, divorce becomes your overarching identity. And, just because you're going through a divorce doesn't mean you're broken. Just because you're divorced doesn't mean, you're broken. You're just a person going through the different stages of life. And, we all know that the divorce rate is, 50+%. So at some point in everyone's life, there's a good chance that you may get divorced. And if you look at the trends, gray divorce is increasing. And I think a big part of it has to do with that, life expectancy is also increasing, and, we make certain decisions in life. So, regret is a terrible thing to have. We often are empowered to make decisions, but we have to make those decisions. And I want to go back to a word you mentioned earlier in our conversation that I don't want to forget, which is joy. There's no point or reason just to exist if you can't find and bring joy into your life. So the reset that you've been given, good or bad, you have an opportunity to bring joy in your life. So, do everything you can to focus on that, because it will make you happier and you'll heal quicker.
And I think there's so much then working with someone like Justin as a coach, and whether you read his book and use the workbook to really get deep into who you are, is so important, because there really are a lot of, my latest blog, as an example, is called, I don't remember the exact title, but something like 32 Common Financial Pitfalls in Divorce. And those are the common ones. So there's a lot of mistakes, especially you unfamiliar, you emotionally charged, you might be a little nervous and scared about what your future is. Unfortunately, you are not making the best decisions that you've ever made, or in the best manner. Having someone like Justin, who is an objective voice, can bring a lot of perspective, can really change the way you make some of those decisions. And again, those were just the common ones that I was able to list, about 32 of them. So being able to navigate this process when you are not alone, I think can be a very powerful way to go through it. And as you said, the more prepared you are, and the more you understand, and the more you kind of realize like how you're getting triggered, the better decisions you're going to make. You're going to go through this in a very different way. You had that, you said, kind of in the middle, where you had that aha moment when you were working with somebody, understanding that difference between this is happening to you or for you. Those are the kind of things that become so important when you can work with a coach. And you talk a lot about rediscovering yourself, empowerment. How does money play into that? And how can somebody rebuild or begin to rebuild their financial confidence after divorce?
Yeah. So it's really hard. I think number one, you have to run the numbers, and you have to find out what is your financial reality. Likely you will not be in as good of a situation, and you'll need to adjust. Also, because money is so tied to our identity, we at one point may have been driving a Porsche, and now we're driving a Honda. Nothing wrong with a Honda. But we also have to acknowledge that there's also a lot more in life than just dollars and cents, but not be naive to the fact that it doesn't matter. You still have to pay your bills. You still have to get a job if you don't have one, and you have to plan for the future. I think another thing is, when it comes to negotiation, you have to look at where are your needs, short, medium, and long term, because you may be fine in the short term, but you don't have enough money, in retirement. And I think in terms of education, a post, or a retirement dollar is not the same as a, after-tax dollar. So we have to make these decisions. So getting educated is really important. We talked about women typically outsourcing their financial decisions, in the marriage. I think it's important that they get educated, during the process, and you don't make decisions based on emotion, but you use your financial team to really help you plan out your future and, negotiate a settlement that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I always encourage people start this all before the end of your divorce. Usually, almost always in a divorce or in a coupleship, one person is managing the finances. I've only seen 1 or 2 times where they really sat down together and did it together. And I've been doing this for almost a dozen years now. So the one party coming out of that divorce has a lot to learn on the financial side. It doesn't mean that the other spouse was doing it well. They weren't born with a calculator. They were winging it themselves, most likely. Having a structure or somebody who can help you really build a structure in how to manage those finances also can be much more efficient. And I'm just going to touch on one. I wish I could ask you. We run out of time already. One of the big ones is the home, right? And I can spend an hour and a half just discussing the home and different things to consider and variations. There are probably half a dozen considerations in that blog I mentioned. That becomes a big one, but how do you balance it into the larger picture, I think becomes a very big one as well. I do need to touch on 2 things, so I'm hurrying through that, but I don't want to pretend like it's not a big topic. The home is a very big topic, but I want to touch on your book. I underlined a few or highlighted a few chapters. I just want to read the titles to give people a feel, and this is, I don't know, probably a quarter of the chapters in there, but Facing the Truth, that's a very big one that I think sometimes people haven't really faced even after the divorce. From We to Me, Breaking Free from the Past. A lot of people, we said this a couple times, get stuck in the past. Rebooting Your Mindset, The Silent Choice That Shapes Everything, which I skimmed these, I went straight to that chapter. Architect of Your Awakening, Self-Care and Wellness, Rediscovering Yourself. These are all incredibly big topics. Each one of these could probably be a show on its own, but that just gives the listeners a little bit of a hint as to, what is in the book. And for those listening, or, maybe beginning or in the middle of this process of reclaiming and rebuilding, what's maybe one practical thing you can say or leave them with this week? They can start doing X and becoming or working towards becoming you 2.0.
So, I have an exercise I give my clients and they love it. It's called, 3-2-1. And every day I have them text me 3 things they're grateful for, 2 things on their to-do list so that they're doing something and they feel productive, and 1 thing they're going to do to bring themselves joy. And, when they do it, it takes them from, a deflated 3 out of 10 to a 7 or 8 out of 10. So mindset is a big part of it.
Yeah. I love that. I'll tell you, I've had clients that I've had a meeting with that'll be 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And I said, well, how's your day? They said, well, I got dressed today.
Yeah.
You really can get into that slump, right? And so being able to have something like that, and that's a pretty quick, easy one. What are 2 things I'm going to do today? You can put them down. They don't have to be changing the world, but it's moving you forward. Even just small increments become very big changes over time. I love that. Once more, before we wrap up, how can people get in touch with you, get a copy of the book and the workbook?
Yeah, absolutely. Visit my website at www.reclaimandreboot.me. You can buy the book and workbook on Amazon.com. Just search up You 2.0, Divorce, A Better Way Forward. You can call or text me on my mobile phone at 404-353-5175 or email me at justin@reclaimandreboot.me.
I encourage people to do it. Justin, thank you, shedding light on not an easy topic. Everyone is an individual. Everyone's journey is a little bit different, and being able to shed some light on certain things. I read some of the topics that are in your book that I think are just so important for people to think through, work through. Ultimately, to thrive is just so important. So I really appreciate you being here and what you've done, taking your life experiences and seeing how you could change your mindset for the better, and being able to help others do that as well, I think is huge. So I am Hirsch Serman, the host of the Financial Wellness Hour. I appreciate everybody joining us. I would love for you to reach out to me on my website, lifecycle.financial. Again, that's lifecycle.financial. Whether you have questions for me or Justin or anything else, please do reach out. I want to thank CC Schatz for the magic behind the scenes. As it happened again, we just ran out of time without even noticing. Things just went so smoothly. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I encourage you and look forward to you joining me on my next show. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.